This is Wretched Radio with Todd Friel.
Who wants to learn from a dead guy?
I do. This is Wretched Radio, not a dead guy we typically quote here on Wretched Radio. George Friedrich Hegel once said, quote, "The only thing we learn from history is that we learn nothing from history." Well, that's pessimistic, and it is contrary to what you were probably taught in school. The people who fail to study history are doomed to repeat it. Not according to Hegel. He said there is nothing we can learn from history. What does that have to do with the price of tea in Texas on a Tuesday? A lot. Because today, according to many social observers, our culture does not desire to teach history. They don't want kids to learn what happened in the past because some observers believe the agenda is to blot it out so that we can create a new progressive future. In other words, ditch everything that has been done in the past. All of it, because we want to be on the right side of history, and progress is always good. According to Rod Dreher, who has written a new book, Concerned We Christians, we're looking at a soft totalitarian regime, citing the two tools that he believes that people on the liberal side tend to use to change a culture. And that is hoisting the flag of progress. It's always good. Everything about what we're doing now is better than what was done in the past. Tim Challies reviewed his book, and he says, this is how totalitarian regimes justify actions that further their control. And this is the way social justice quickly becomes more than an ideology, but an alternative religion that to succeed must stamp out its Christian competitor. Because we're old school. We're not cutting edge. Why? We stand in opposition to progressive ideologies in culture.
Well, we believe in history, too.
And you believe in history because you believe that there's something to be learned and that we stand on the shoulders of dead guys. Now, that is our culture. That is what is going on, people believe, in our world. I think it's pretty obvious. But here's the question for you. Is it also happening in the church? Is the ideology that progress is always good been embraced by evangelical Christianity? And I would like to make the case for you that it absolutely has, starting with the seeker-sensitive movement. This isn't your grandma's church, don't you know? We need to update church. We need to update the faith. We need to update the way that we preach. We need to
update
get rid
the
of
Bible.
Everything. We need to update the Bible. We need a cooler version. We need to make sure that it's understood by people today because we like progress. And therefore, we jettison the old. And I can't help but see a similarity between what the world is doing and what we're doing inside of the church. Let me share with you a quote from another dead guy. This one better. In a letter to Robert Hooke, 1675, Sir Isaac Newton wrote, quote, "If I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants." In other words, if John Newton has made a contribution to Christianity, helping us love the Lord more, cherish his word more, it's simply because he stood on the shoulders of giants, people who have come before him. He didn't jettison them. He stood on their shoulders. Did he embrace everything they taught? No. Did he recognize that history happens in time and that there are different contexts and there are different considerations? Yes, he got that. But he did not jettison everything like we're doing these days in the church. That is why all of your cherished, whether it's liturgies, Bible studies, clothing for that matter, music,
cancel.
All of it's gone.
Throw it out.
We got to have the new stuff, Daddy-O. Now, do we have to stick with the old? That isn't the point. The point is that we don't just casually toss it all out without stopping to think. Did dead guys think? Didn't they study the Bible? Did they not have the Holy Spirit too? This from Feeding on Christ, an article titled "The Shoulders of Giants and the Council of the wise. When Rehoboam ascended the throne, you remember the story. It's a great one. And if you ever want to use a historical narrative to perhaps point younger generations toward the wisdom of the older, this most certainly would be the story. Rehoboam became the king. Solomon died, and he sought counsel from two groups. Now, Solomon, the wisest man in the world, he'd been taxing people, and they didn't like it. His son, Rehoboam, comes along, and he seeks counsel from two different groups regarding taxes. His father's elders and his young friends. And his father's elders said, don't be raising the taxes there, son. Just slow your roll. The people are feeling it, and if you pinch them too hard, they're going to yelp. By way of contrast, his friends said, tighten the screws. Give it to him.
There's the pressure.
Show him who's in charge here. And Rehoboam listened to the latter. And the nation was divided because in came Jeroboam, because people were miserable, unhappy, and they didn't want to pay taxes, and they didn't want to follow Rehoboam. You can read all about it in 1 Kings chapter 12. He abandoned the counsel of the old, and he took counsel with the young. And rather than listening to sage advice, to people who understood something of history, nope, he went with the cutting edge. He went with progress. There is a lesson to be learned here. And that is not that we don't care about progress. Of course, people want to make things better. Of course, we want to stay with the times because we are living in this world, just not of this world. But we have opened up the doors of the church, and progress has come flooding in. It has overwhelmed our ecclesiology, the way that we do church, the way that we think about church. We dress to match the culture. We remove, for instance, and I'm not making it a law, but we remove pulpits and put plexiglass tables in front of it instead. Now, I'm not saying that's a sin to do so, but why did we make that change? What was wrong with the pulpit? If you've ever preached, I got to tell you, having a pulpit with a little bit of an angle, it's really helpful. Now, these days you put a table. They are not as efficient for the preacher, and yet we put them there. Why? Well, because we don't want people to
trendy.
think. Well, the pulpit, too, it's kind of authoritarian, and it seems old school, so let's just look a little cooler. That's progress, Daddy-O. And I wonder...
But at what cost?
That's exactly the point. Dead guys know something. David and Solomon, though themselves especially endowed with wisdom, governed their kingdoms with the help of wise advisors. The more there were of such advisors, the safer the people were. And yet today, take a look around your church. How many gray hairs do you see sitting in front of you?
You sometimes come to church, so
I got a few. I got a few. I got more than Phil Johnson. Phil Johnson. I'm telling you, that man's got to be dyeing his hair. I'm just telling you, he's got to be dyeing his hair. It's unbelievable. It's like thicket up there. It's like the underbrush on top of his head, and he's still not gray. Nevertheless, look around. How many seniors do you see? Where do they go? It seems we don't want them. We tell them your music is fuddy-duddy. We tell them we don't like the way you get up too early. You do the church service too long. You don't use the right instrument. We don't like it. Now, again, this is not to say you can't make changes, but it is to say, are we seeking the wisdom of the wise? Are we seeking them out to say, hey, why did y'all do this? Are we going back in time to discover why decisions were made? The piece of advice from Feeding on Christ. Ministers, and this goes for all of us, must first be men of the word, poring over the Bible. Pastors, then, must be men who diligently search the annals of church history, giving careful consideration to the theological formulations of the early church. What about the writings of the church fathers? Were they all stupid? The medieval scholastics, there are things to learn and things to not learn from them. The pre-reformers, the reformers, how's about the Puritan, even some pietists? How's about the 1900s? There was some brilliant work being done. J.C. Ryle, one of my favorites. We can learn from those people. And before we commit the crime that our secular world is committing, even as we speak, by indoctrinating society to say all things old, we're not going to study them, we don't remember them, we don't care about them, we've got to make progress. And they use it as a tool to introduce totalitarianism. I wonder if it isn't being used as a tool by progressive people inside of the church, not to usher in totalitarianism, but to usher in liberal theology, different views of the Bible, and perhaps even if it is not wittingly, a different gospel. We can learn from dead guys. And as we look at our culture and go, they're not teaching the kids history these days. Let's not commit the crime of Hegel. And let's not commit the crime of our world. Let's dip back into the deep well of dead guys and learn from them. This is Wretched Radio.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is